104.5 The Team, your home for New York sports. It's a crazy time in college football, so we need some help navigating the waters. We've got the knowledge from the National College Football reporter for ESPN, Adam Rittenberg, joining us. Biggest upset over the weekend was
Michigan and Iowa. I just didn't see that one coming, not because I don't respect Iowa's program, and certainly playing at Kinnick Stadium on a Saturday night is a very difficult thing to do, but I just didn't have, this particular Iowa team hadn't shown the capability to take down a team of the caliber of Michigan. Iowa had been blown out the week before against Penn State. They were non-competitive in that game, and I didn't think their defense would be able to hold Michigan to 13 points, but Wilton Speight gets injured, and Michigan doesn't have a whole lot else left, and, again, Iowa finds a way to get it done. They've had some success now against Michigan at home, but this may have been the biggest upset that I can remember for Iowa in recent memory. They actually did beat Penn State, though, interestingly enough, 8 years earlier. They beat a 9-0 Penn State team on the last-second field goal. So they something special about Kinnick Stadium, and not so good if you're an undefeated team trying to win a national title.
Adam, it's funny that I'm going to ask this because I watch Michigan pretty closely up here in upstate New York. Our allegiances are all over the map. Wilton Speight's first pass, it's an interception. Now I'm looking at it and wondering just how good Michigan is without him. Are they still contenders without Speight?
It's going to be tough. They should be able to beat Indiana this week. I'll be at that game. Indiana can score. That's the only concern, though. If Indiana's able to hit some big plays on Michigan's defense, you can't count on that offense necessarily to put up huge numbers. But John O'Korn wasn't exactly, leaps and bounds behind Wilton Speight in this quarterback competition. He's a guy who had started at the FBS level at Houston, put up some good numbers a few years ago. And so I don't think it's necessarily a huge problem bringing him in. It's not as though he's a freshman who's never played before, but obviously he's going to be playing in the biggest games of the season, especially next week against Ohio State. So they're going to have to rely on their defense, but I don't think the game plan is going to be completely different for John O'Korn. Can he just rise to the occasion now? Because a lot of it's going to be on his shoulders.
So Michigan goes down. Washington goes down over the weekend. Clemson as well. Tonight, the College Football Committee releases the top 4 and the whole top 25. The most likely top 4 we're going to get tonight is what?
Wow, it's going to be the most interesting ranking that I can remember for the committee. I know some people think these are pointless and, just for TV, and I guess that's true to an extent, but I think we do get a better idea of how the committee's thinking after tonight's ranking. Alabama obviously will be number 1. I'd be surprised if Ohio State isn't 2 based on the success that they've had recently, plus they have the resume to be in the top 4. And then I think Clemson may stay at 3, which is amazing. Drop 1 spot to number 3 after their loss against Pitt because they still have the resume with their win against Auburn on the road, their win against Florida State on the road, and their win against Louisville at home. I don't know how the committee, based on how it judges teams, even though Louisville's ahead of Clemson in the AP poll, the committee's protocol is different. And I'd be very surprised, guys, if Louisville is ahead of a team that it lost to in a head-to-head matchup in Clemson. So I think Clemson's 3, and then the 4 spot should be fascinating to see if Michigan stays there, if it's Louisville, perhaps. It won't be Washington anymore. So I think that's the big mystery again, but for different reasons this week than the previous 2 weeks, number 4.
If that's the case, if Clemson does go to 3 and that, I guess it's a toss-up for the 4 spot, it seems like there's no room for Louisville to really move and catch up to Clemson because you're not going to wash away that head-to-head matchup ever on that schedule.
Well, the only way, honestly, there's a couple things. I mean, Clemson could lose this week to Wake Forest. That's put Louisville in the ACC championship as long as, actually Louisville's already done with their ACC schedule. So they would be in that game with a chance to qualify for the playoff. If Clemson were to lose to South Carolina next week, not a very good South Carolina team, even if they won the ACC title, would the committee consider putting Louisville in over Clemson? And then obviously if they lose the ACC title game to Virginia Tech or North Carolina, Clemson would that change the outlook for Louisville? But most likely, Louisville's going to need help from other conferences. The Pac-12, who had their front-runner lose this week in Washington, maybe something quirky in the Big Ten, which is getting more and more interesting with Michigan's situation and Penn State, playing better football. But, yeah, it's just one of those teams, guys, in one of those seasons where it's a really impressive team with obviously the best player in the country this year, Lamar Jackson. But as we've seen in the playoff era, even the BCS era, you also need the luck of the schedule to go your way. And unfortunately for Louisville, all the scheduling breaks have pretty much gone against them.
ESPN's Adam Rittenberg helping us get ready for tonight's unveiling of the new top four for the college football playoffs. So we're all trying to figure out the formula. How much do you feel the conference champions matter, like the championship games matter to the committees?
The way that they look at it is that if the teams are comparable, if they're within striking distance to each other in all other categories, the conference champion's going to go over the non-conference champion. So if Louisville wants to get in as a non-conference champion, it has to be unequivocally better than a conference champion. Now, what does that exactly mean? It's subjective. And that's this whole thing is somewhat subjective, although the committee uses a lot of data. I went through the mock selection a few weeks ago, and I can tell you they have tremendous amounts of data at their disposal. But they have to ultimately determine the unequivocally better non-league champion is better than the conference champion. I think the more interesting comparison, guys, could end up being Ohio State, especially if it's Wisconsin that wins the Big Ten, over a Penn State team. Let's say that happens. So Ohio State finishes with one loss. They have a win over the likely Big 12 champion in Oklahoma. They have a win over Wisconsin on the road, who won the Big Ten. Who are you going to put in? Are you going to put in Wisconsin, who won its league championship, or are you going to put in Ohio State, which has one fewer loss plus a head-to-head victory? So that's a really interesting debate if that ends up coming to pass. But really, for the non-league champions, they have to have a lot on their profile to force the committee to put them in over a league champion.
Is Alabama in a spot now that even if they lose to Auburn, no matter what, they're going to be in the top four and have already basically clinched the spot in the college football playoff?
It's very hard to envision a scenario that Alabama isn't in the playoffs. I think, you lose to Auburn, you're still the SEC West champion. You go to play a Florida or Tennessee in Atlanta, you win that game, you're in. I even think if you lose to Auburn, if you beat Auburn and you lose the SEC championship game, Alabama's in. They're not going to put in the SEC East champ. They shouldn't, and they aren't going to put in anyone else from the West. Everybody else has 3 or more losses. It eliminates you from the conversation. So, it's a unique year in the SEC with not a whole lot of drama. You have one division that's obviously stronger than the other division, but you basically have Alabama and then a massive gap with everyone else. So, if any team can pretty much punch its ticket to the playoff at this point, it's the defending national champion.
National college football reporter for ESPN, Adam Rittenberg. Follow him on Twitter at Adam Rittenberg. So what games are you looking forward to this weekend? What's on Rittenberg's radar? And you can use that.
Yeah, I will. I'll trademark that. No, I think the Big 12 game is interesting just because we're not talking about that conference at all. Oklahoma and West Virginia are playing on Saturday night in Morgantown. It's the ABC primetime game. And I think that, West Virginia, they're still a one-loss team. They're a team that the schedule hasn't exactly worked out in favor of, but they get Oklahoma this week. That's an opportunity for a signature win. They have beaten BYU. They beat TCU. So it's a pretty good football team that maybe could get some consideration depending on what happens elsewhere. And then you have Oklahoma, who has a chance to run the table in the Big 12 and get in that way. So, that one is certainly one that I'm looking at. Also in the Pac-12, the race there is getting interesting. Washington still, is there in the Pac-12 North. They have Washington State next week in the Apple Cup, but two teams that actually Washington State is going to visit Colorado this week. So big game, for both of those teams to try to move closer to getting into the Pac-12 championship. Those are two. I mean, there's not a whole lot else this week on the schedule. The game that I'll be at, Indiana and Michigan, is only interesting because how does Michigan react from its first loss and from losing its quarterback, Will Spade, to an unfortunate injury.
Adam Rittenberg, follow him on Twitter at Adam Rittenberg. We really appreciate your time. We know you're busy as all get out today, and we look forward to seeing your reports on ESPN.com.
Okay, guys, I appreciate it.